house on it.
You could do.
Hello, everyone.
You can check that out.
My name is Hans Klimzon. I'm chairman of the Village of Fishkill Planning Board, and this time I'll call the Village of Planning Board for January 16th, 2025 to order. Will the secretary please take a roll call to establish a quorum?
Lisa Costello,
Here.
Ezra Holly,
Here.
Tricia Rice.
Here.
Esther Jackson,
Here.
Joe Testa.
Here.
Also in attendance are Nick Warner, the building inspector, Kristen Podgy, village engineer, Cassandra Britton, the planning attorney, and trustee Anthony Ruggiero, liaison to the planning board.
Okay, we have a full quorum this evening. This time I'd like to welcome Nick Warner, the new building inspector.
Oh, wow. Like a revolving.
Is everybody going to be able to meet the February 20th meeting?
Like, you know. Yeah, probably, yeah.
Okay, then as of right now, it's going to be a very short meeting, and then after the meeting, we're going to have a training session. So
Right.
we can get some points in, okay?
Okay, good.
I just
Okay.
want to make sure we have enough people here.
For February.
For February, right. Also notify the zoning board
Okay.
of that, okay. This time I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of 10/17/24.
So move the adjusted minutes, because we had two of them. Yep.
All right.
Second.
I have a motion second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay. It's the representative for the sign company for Go Health here. Okay. The first on the agenda is Go Health Urgent Care, 701-703 Route 9 for sign approval. Please state your name and yeah, if you want. Sure, why not?
Sorry, my name is Pedro Vesperman. I'm a representative of, I work with Tri-State Signs and Awnings. And I'm here representing Go Health, New Advanced Go Health Urgent Care.
Now, as I understand that the former building inspector gave a temporary permit for you to
That
install
was
the signs, so I'm assuming, Nick, do you know? You have any comments as to the sign at all? Or?
I have no comments to add tonight, Mr. Chairman. I believe that that is an accurate representation that a temporary permit had been previously issued by Mr. Buckley before he had departed, yes.
Okay. So these are the colors and the locations of these signs, correct?
Correct.
These signs are up. Carissa, comments?
Just checking the math. The application, the size of this is which sign is it though? How many signs are it? The wall sign? On the application, it's 2.3 times by 8.9. So it's 20.47 feet, not 21.33 square feet. As indicated on the application. Did anyone else check my math? Right? Better. So it's smaller.
Sure.
Unless it must have been a round up or round down.
Yeah, I'm checking as well.
You're right. So do you have the original application? Mark it up. Okay, so it should be 20.47 square feet.
What was it?
20.47
Instead of 21?
instead of 21.33. Okay. Do you have samples?
Yes, I do. This is the problem.
Mm-hmm. And this sign is for this one here? Oh, okay,
You want-
but this isn't the one on the, or
No,
this, what are these?
this is facing the street.
Are they already there?
Yeah.
Can we approve those? I have no recollection of the last meeting. Okay.
You want to sign this, sir? One addition. This right there.
Like the Mets. Let's go Mets.
Yeah, you want to pass them down?
Any other comments?
So we're only approving the one sign, even though there's pictures of three of them, three different pictures in this
We only have an application for one.
one. Okay.
Oh.
No, does it meet the requirements, Nick?
This does meet the requirements for the zone, and
Okay. All right, I'm good.
Okay.
No questions for me.
No? No? Joe, you have any comments?
Bill?
No.
Comments?
No? Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion to accept the sign.
Move to accept the sign for Go Health Urgent Care at 703 Route 9 with the correction to the square footage on the application.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. There, motion is carried.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening, guys.
Next item on the agenda is Mobile Development Corporation Subdivision 35 Rapple J Road. Is the applicant present? State your name for the record.
Today, James, engineer. Representing Mobile. We were here a number of months ago. And the issue came up about the proposed lot being in floodplain. Since that time, we've been working with a land surveyor, Mr. Jonathan Millens. Jonathan has submitted a revision to FEMA and was able to obtain a LOMA, which is and basically what they did was they were able to push the boundary further to the north to allow us to be able to fit the residence that was proposed originally on it with some minor maneuvering. I did receive a comment letter this evening before coming that code would require 25% of it to be in a floodplain. It's actually 35.7% of the lot is in there still remains part of the floodplain on it. Historically, we've all been here before, but no one has any recollection of it flooding. Not that that's something you'd hold on to for life, but this was revised. And I understand we need to meet setbacks to the actual floodplain line, which is going to make it difficult. The one question we have is if that's the case, and this floodplain line crosses diagonally through the lot, at what point the rear, at what point does this become a rear line and not a side line? You know what I'm saying? Because it crosses at an angle. At what point do you consider it side yard or rear yard?
We were,
Engineering.
so yeah, we've been having some conversations about, there's a couple of different sections in the code that are vague. There's been some precedents, I guess, that's been set with prior projects that have been in the floodplain. That was one of the questions that we raised also, Mark, was where would we take, the front of your building looks like it would meet the side yard setback, but the rear wouldn't. So, because it's on the angle. So where would that setback be taken? I was even questioning whether or not the setback needed to be taken to the floodplain because the way that the code is written, it says, it's dry ground. So, but you ask 10 people, 5 people would agree with you and 5 people would disagree with you. So it's pretty vague, what the requirements are. I know, that Cassandra here is on the opposite side of that. She believes that her interpretation would be that it would be, you would take the setback to the floodplain line based on her reading of the code. But neither of us should be interpreting the code. So it's really for the planning board, I think, to,
Well, so this is in the zoning codes, it's actually the building inspector, so my recommendation, for this is that the planning board asks the building inspector, well, the current CEO, for, an interpretation on this issue. And then there's another, section of the code that me and Christian discussed, where it's gonna be up to the planning board, as he just said. There's a part of the code that basically says it's in the subdivision code, not in the zoning code. That says, I have to pull it up, but essentially it goes on to say anything flood, fire, or, anything in this zone is like a danger and therefore cannot be subdivided. That's up to the planning board to decide. You can ask the building inspector for his opinion, but it's not binding. And I interpret that as you shouldn't be able to build, but you can ask again, 10 people, and it's really gonna be up to the board to decide what they think that code provision means. And I apologize, let me pull up the section.
I've referenced that section directly in my comment letter. That's my first comment, section 139-40, land subject to fire, flood, and other hazards. It's one line, I can just read it. Land to be subdivided shall be of such character that it can be used safely for building purposes without danger to health or peril from fire, flood, or other menace. Land subject to such hazards shall not be subdivided nor developed for residential purposes, nor for such other use as may increase danger to health, life, or property, or aggravate a flood hazard. But such land may be set aside for such uses as shall not involve such danger or produce unsatisfactory living condition. So, I believe that this came up with, Jackson Crossing, phase 1, where they needed to merge the properties, and it was considered a subdivision because it was, there was a determination that merger constituted a subdivision, and you guys needed to get the property out of the floodplain by filling the site and providing flood storage. So that was how you were able to get around it for that. So if the board feels that this is a similar situation or a different feeling on their interpretation of what the code is, I mean, that's up for the board to decide, but.
Nick?
Well, I can hear you.
Welcome back. Welcome, this is a good.
Considering that I saw the emails this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I would not be comfortable rendering an opinion tonight. But I could do so before the next meeting so that the applicants would have time to respond and decide their course of action. However, I think that I would have to agree, based off of what Christian is saying, that it would probably fall within that section. I will give a formal interpretation if that's what the board would like me to do.
If I may, based on that, the email, I mean, honestly, we can reconfigure what's on here to get farther away from the floodplain. The garage, right now we're showing 2 cars, we're gonna get 1 car. We could actually pull the house closer to the south line, or east line, sorry. And, I mean, we can manipulate this house. This is just a house that we had shown on the original, and we decided to keep it if it fit, but I mean, everything you see here is out of the floodplain. That's deck, driveway, garage, house. So,
What is the setback in feet
From,
the flood line.
right now we're showing about 2 feet on the house, but we can make it 12.
What is our requirement?
Well, so the first question is whether or not he could even subdivide, and that's a board decision. And then the second question is if he could subdivide and the board goes that way, the official determination from the building inspector will say where the set lines are. So that's the building inspector's role, is to, how do you read the setbacks based on the code, and where they should be read from, if it's read from the back. So the question is whether or not we apply it from the floodplain or we apply it from the edge of the property. If it's from the edge of the property, he's in compliance. The chart is wrong, it just needs to be updated. You flipped one of the totals. It's right on the chart. I mean, it's right on the thing, but it's not right on the chart.
I'm getting older, so.
Or whether or not it should be read from the floodplain. If it's read from the floodplain, then it's additional 12 feet from the floodplain. So I don't even know if you could move it to be in compliance.
I can make the house work. I'd probably have to remove the garage.
You could move the house 12 feet over from
Yeah.
the side. Oh, I guess if you move it up.
Yeah, I can move it up a little bit, or I can narrow the home.
Okay.
We're trying to make it look like the general residential area.
Front yard is 30.
Well, I think the prudent thing would be to get a formal interpretation from the building inspector.
Yeah, we can't make a decision till,
I would just like more clarity on the subdivision of the floodplain, because you said this is a two-part.
Somewhere we have to.
Yeah,
So
so,
starting with that, I want to just try to understand that a little bit better.
so essentially your code was read by the engineer.
Yeah.
Essentially what it's saying is you can't build houses in a flood zone or in a fire zone because of danger, right? So FEMA has said this is at a 100-year floodplain, which means there is in a 100-year weather event, which is becoming more common every year now.
Yeah, right.
It has a 1% chance of happening.
Right, no, I understand that.
Yeah,
I do that with work, but they might need more clarification. I'm just trying to understand. So from the subdivision, aspect, we would say, I have to decide whether or not, just even doing that in general,
Correct.
because there's that floodplain on it.
Yeah, so
It
you
might not
have,
be something that we can,
you have
or,
to read the intention of the code. Was the intention of the code to prevent subdivisions because they don't want houses built by floodplains? Or was the intention of the code, to not build directly on the floodplain? If that makes sense.
yeah,
And then, once that's determined, then you have the setback question. Which will be, that's an official building inspector decision of how they'll be read.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to what Christian said, is that it rests with you before my interpretation. You have to determine whether or not it can be subdivided first.
And excuse me, is H&H able to help us with an interpretation of the zoning code? Because that's the question, right? Like if the first
Well,
question?
I mean, if I might be mistaken, but
Yeah.
this is the code that you have in your comments, right, Christian?
In
Yes,
the engineering comments,
So
right?
that's the code you directly took from the village code, and that's what we have to kind of interpret as a board
Exactly.
for the subdivision.
Right, and my question is if council can help us also with an interpretation of that code.
Yeah, I mean, I could write up a short memo.
That'd be great, thank you.
Victoria and me can write a short memo explaining, and I would like to discuss it with the building inspector as well.
Awesome, thank you so much.
so what are all these letters here from FEMA?
FEMA. Basically, it's a summation of the work that was done by Jonathan, which if you've ever worked with FEMA and you'd rather get your teeth pulled. But that's a summation of actually what happened in him making his calculations and determinations based on actual topo that he did. But remember, FEMA is based on really aerial topo, USGS, if you will. He goes in and, surveyor typically goes in and gets it more refined. And based on that refinement, we were able to prove to FEMA that the line should be further to the north. So that's how that new line was established. Based on, this is a numbered zone, meaning there is a elevation assigned to this floodplain in that area. So, and that's how they go through the calculation. They know what the number is based on FEMA studies, and then he goes in, does a survey, refines it, and then really ties it into that elevation. So that's all what that says.
So basically move the line back about, I don't know, 20 feet. or
Correct.
or basically, so that just that upper right corner is
Is really
in the flood zone still.
Yeah,
So-
so the blue area here, you see, is where what was given back. if you will,
Okay,
Comes out of the flood.
okay.
This was the old floodplain line
Mhm.
based on their actual firm. And then this is the new line based on calculated elevations.
So whatever the green area is out of the floodplain,
Correct.
and then there's a purple area that's striped, the purple striped area.
Yes, this is what was given back. This is still in the
And
east of
So
the west.
that's what you said was the 37%?
The 37% is this area, yes.
Okay, so addressing Sarah's comment that there should, well, no more than 25% of the minimum area requirement of a lot may be fulfilled by land which is underwater or subject to periodic flooding. So is that a variance?
Yeah, so I think I misheard. So you said 30%, 37% or 35% remains in the flood zone?
35.7%.
Yeah, so you would need a variance from the ZBA if you want to seek this, if you want to move forward with this application as is.
And
In all honesty, I don't know that we're gonna move in that direction unless we
Yeah,
get
we
an
you
understanding.
would want to know if we're going to let you do it first. That's, okay.
Can I make a comment? The client, the applicant.
Can you use the microphone, please? Microphone, thank you.
My name is Momir Guzian and I own that house next door, one that I just redid. And this took about a year to get to this point. I also just did a house across the church, with St. Mary's Church, you all guys are probably familiar with, right across the street, which is right next to the creek. It only took us like a couple months. This is almost 11 months we're going to get there. There's no such a thing, even the FEMA tell me on the phone. There's no such a thing as because the Burger King took everything out of there when they built the Burger King. So there was no issue whatsoever. Even Keith Schofield came a couple times here. His mom lives next door. I bought the property from them. Nobody ever remembers having a flood there at all. But just like my Osborne Inn, it was the same thing. Restaurant is in a flood zone. By the time we did the work, it's not in a flood zone. Again, I'm not gonna convince you because you already got the paperwork to tell you that there's no danger whatsoever. So I applied it, I went with it, 11 months later, we're still waiting. This was a subdivision, this was a lot number one. I don't understand that the guy bought two lots, which gentleman was gonna willing to come here, because he wanted a side yard. It's still the same subdivision. I thought it was a very simple thing to come back there, I'm gonna put down the lot. We find out there's a section was in the flood zone, so we took it out. 11 months later, we're still here debating what we're gonna do. So I don't know what else I can do with it.
So these were two lots that were subdivided into one lot at some point in the past. Is it possible for you to provide like the documentation for that? I think that would be helpful, like.
The owner who's been there 50 years, the man
Yeah.
just passed away. This is Keith's uncle, and the people living across the street. They bought this when the Rapid Row was built.
Mhm.
He bought both lots because he didn't want a neighbor next door. But if you look at it, you can see on the map that this was
Yeah, then Dutchess County would have record of that, right? Like they would have record of it being two separate lots that were purchased at the
We
same
should.
time.
It shows right on the map.
Is it possible for you all to find that and present it to us? Because I think that would be very helpful in making a determination. Be great. I mean, because if that's the case, I feel like that's important, possibly even with the interpretation of the zoning.
you know, we gotta get an answer from you before we see.
I don't understand how that could be the case. Like, I'm saying that we need more information to make a decision. So how can we give you a decision without the information that's being requested?
Well, whether this was two lots at any point, it doesn't take away the fact there's a floodplain on it. There would have been a
Okay.
floodplain on that lot as well.
Okay, sure.
And we just did one, I'm sorry to tell you, but listen, we just did the, right next to the creek, you just see it, the house that I just finished across the St. Mary's Church. It's right next to the creek, he did the same thing, the only thing took us last time, went to the town of Fishkill, and we got a building permit, the house is done, is sold, and people live in there. And I'm only 20 feet away from the creek, this has nothing to do with the water at all, it's just the
I
way
get what
they.
you're saying, but on paper it does.
No,
So,
but that's why we paid so much money to engineers and everybody else to go to take it out of the flood zone. I mean, there's no law said you can't build in the flood zone. If you gotta take it out of the flood zone, but that's what we did. No, I understand, but I applies it.
There is a section of the subdivision code. It's explicitly in the law.
But we have to take it out of the flood zone. The reason last meeting we came to, this was told to us to go with this, take it out of the flood zone factor. We advised that way.
After the application that had absolutely, maybe just a little corner was still on the flood zone. FEMA has said, when we have a 100-year water event, this will flood. You're putting a house right on that line, and it's a danger to everyone because if you can go to septic, it's gonna flood. There's practical concerns with building things in a 100-year flood zone. And because it's a residential, small residential house, no one's asking for a SWIP or anything that's gonna take away the stormwater in this crazy event. This is just a small residential house that would be unreasonable. So, I mean, that's why this law exists, and the village is small, and, you know, flooding affects everyone. The more you're getting rid of permeable surface, already in a flood.
Well, I'm just looking again, we've been doing this for all, I'm not gonna try to prove you guys wrong. I'm gonna just tell you one thing, with this is this subdivision existed there, we have a sewer water, there's no septic involved, and Burger King put $500,000 into the drainage to resolve all the neighborhood. And the house next door to me has the full basement, I mean, the apartment in the basement, which is, if there's any issues at all over 30 years, that would be flooded, not us. And now all of a sudden, we're taking the lot away and saying we can't build on it because it's in a flood zone. Well, we were directed to take it out.
Changes. You're getting more severe weather events, so the risk of flooding is even greater than it's ever been. And it's just a danger to the community. It's just gonna be a board decision of whether or not they consider this safe. And any evidence, as, I apologize, I don't know your name yet.
Oh, Esther, hi.
She's asked for information. So if you have information showing that this is never flooded or dry, I mean, maybe that could be persuasive to the board. You're not gonna provide.
But what information can we get?
Yeah,
What information can we get with subdivision shows the lot 1, 2, 3? Oh, the lot
And
2.
Mark, the llama that you guys got, is that just based on verifying and confirming, elevations out there?
yeah, it was based on revised not revised, but more accurate topo
Yeah.
than, let's say they
To match
use,
to match the BFE that they had
right.
published? Okay,
Now, the question is the BFE accurate?
right. I was gonna.
Now, you know, our question is, if you look at it, we don't think it is, because if you look at where the BFE actually runs through the village, historically, it's never flooded.
What's a BFE?
Oh,
Base
base
flood
flood
elevation.
elevation.
And that's what they use for the most part, with some exceptions, to develop these lines. But it is not an exact science by any stretch of the imagination. And we've been involved in projects where we've actually tried to pursue moving the line, not based on just to verifying the elevation or getting more accurate elevation, but saying that their BFE is wrong. So based on historical data.
Right.
So I don't know if there's an avenue to push with FEMA, but I know that's not, you already been through it once and it's.
Yeah, I mean, FEMA, you know, we went back and forth with them.
I mean, did you say, you know, that what you were telling us, there's never been a flood, blah, blah, blah?
And you can
And
tell.
Burger King alleviated a lot of the potential danger.
The
So
problem
why didn't
is
they move the flood zone all the way back to 0?
FEMA is only gonna base their information on, let's say, a HEC-RAS study, which is a hydrogeological study which analyzes the entire watershed, floodway, floodplain, but it's a very detailed study and very, expensive, and it's not something that, you're certainly gonna do for a two-lot split. I mean, Burger King, I'm not sure what they did in their study, but, I mean, the best we can do is, Mr. Schofield, Keith's father, Glenn Schofield. He has stated to me that, for all the years they've owned that property, he's never had a flood there. Which you have to understand, if you look at your old flood maps in the village, you're gonna see areas where it just is not possible to flood. But it's not something that you would be able to prove without going out and doing one of these hydrogeological studies, which takes into account culverts, any kind of, undulations and topography, which aren't covered in a FEMA map. They basically look from 2,000 feet in the air, and they generate, a lot of these maps are generated on 5-foot and 10-foot contours. That's why your first approach is to refine the survey to get closer to what's actually on site and then compare it to the BFE. But there's no guarantee that the BFE is accurate, as Christian said. The base flood elevation is derived from a very broad brush approach. And oftentimes, in my short career, we've run into it a number of times where it's absolutely incorrect. If anybody knows, in Wappinger, up on top of the hill, one of the highest points in Wappinger, there's a floodplain there.
Well, excuse me, Mark, my Osborne Hill restaurant, Michael's, it's on the flood zone. Now, my cottage on the bottom, which is 28 feet below, it's not. But Osborne Hill restaurant is. So it took us a couple months and they said, yeah, that's was shot from 3,000 feet. Don't worry about mold, and they took it out. So there's a lot of areas, they just give you a shadow. I mean, my own house has this thing on the back of it, and I'm 14 feet high. So, but we have to go through all this to prove it that never gonna be any issue at all. If we knew this, we wouldn't have probably gone if we knew there was the issue, but they said, just take it out of the, like we did the rest of the lots, and that'll be it.
Mark? How much fill would you need to, bring it up?
Take it? Well, the problem is with Phil, then you've got to, you're basically back into a HEC-RAS study to prove that you're not, let's say, creating a floodplain, you're impacting a floodplain up there. Believe it or not, if you put a foot of fill in there, you're out of it. So this area here that stayed in it, it's a foot. It's not a lot of water. So I mean, when you look at the code, and I understand, what we're proposing is nothing's in that floodplain. As theoretical as it may be, we're not in it. If the code reads we gotta meet the setbacks, then we change the configuration of the house. We think we can do it. I honestly don't think it's necessary. We're trying to make this house look like the house next door or other homes around it.
Can you back that up a little bit, just so we can see a couple things?
They have village sewer and water over there?
Yes.
So something
This is the existing home right now. Correct.
Um,
Inside these lines, which is 0.61 acres. Do we have a minimum acreage for building in the village?
You mean lot acreage?
Mhm.
Yes, you have a minimum. In this, I believe it's 10,000 feet in this zone.
so you're proposing leaving like the area that's in the floodplain alone as like grass. Could you instead install like plants that would help to mitigate water if there was a flooding event? Like, could there be an installation of like a native plant section that would act as like a retention area, or in the retention pond is a part of this, it's not part of Burger King, it's a separate thing? Oh, I see, but like that, but that's in the opposite corner, right, from like what?
The floodplain goes like this.
The floodplain is in, right, okay. So it's in so it's the same section. Okay, but that could potentially also happen in the lot that we're subdividing. There could be an addition of like some sort of native plant area to handle water overflow, should water overflow occur? Is that a thing that could?
He was showing me what my.
Oh, that's okay. We were talking about the retention pond, but that's on the Burger King property, but I was asking if this plan could be modified to include like a native plant area that could also, right, if you're leaving it alone and it's has a potential to flood, is that something that's like is that even within the scope of what the planning board can like advise or ask?
At this point, the issue is, there needs to be a determination on that section of 230 dash.
Right, so the first question is, can we,
Yeah,
are we going to allow the subdivision?
exactly,
Right, sure.
So
exactly.
I'm reading this and it says, danger to health or peril from fire flood. Now, I've had flooding in my yard and I'm not in a flood zone. There was no peril or danger. It was just a pain in the ass. And, I had to pump out my basement just only once and I've been here for 25 years. So, I mean, that's the interpretation that I'm fixated on, I suppose. Yes, it isn't a flood, but is there danger? Based on historical, there's never been a flood there. No one's ever had any kind of issues. Not like down by the, Myron down
Oh,
the
yeah.
street, or even, last year in front of, not Burger King, Taco Bell and Wendy's, that whole street was flooded for a short time. So, and that to me would be peril and danger. But, if your backyard is a little wet, that's, sucks for you or the person who's living there, but not for.
But it wouldn't be, it's not near the deck, you could stand on your deck and stare at the water, but you're not in the water.
I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from. Again,
But
10,000,
even-
a
yeah,
helicopter view of
Can I
it,
just
I
admit-
suppose.
So even if we do, let's assume we did the crawl space with like I did next door. By grading it, we almost, even with your grade goes directly into the detention pond, into the Burger King.
Yeah, it's not gonna help it. It's not gonna do us any good to regrade it. Your floodplain's your floodplain.
No, but I'm saying, but it's not, I
Right.
don't know where everybody think this water is becoming from. There's never been there, and even the worst storm we have now, Fishkill is flooding, and we don't have a drop of water, not in the weather area that they pulled it out.
Yeah,
And
no,
that's why we decided
I
to do it.
get it. I mean, that's where my interpretation of it. Yes, if we take this for, any kind of flooding, then no one's gonna live anywhere.
Right.
So I think it's the death, is it death, health, danger to health or peril? Peril.
Yeah, I'm happy
Word.
to keep talking about it, but I definitely need time to hear an interpretation of the village code from the building inspector and also from council to help us make a decision. But I'm happy to keep talking tonight, but just not prepared to make a decision this evening.
All right, I don't know how I come back. That's right. I mean, I don't know how I resubmit unless the board gives me some direction as to how I come back.
So my recommendation would be that, the building inspector has stated he can do an interpretation by the next meeting. I can do a short memo. And I mean, there's a lot, I can say what I think the intention was, but the memo is not gonna be that strong. I didn't write the rule. And I can give a little more background, but once that happens, I mean, you have to also see, the interpretation will determine whether or not you want to move forward. Even if they allow the subdivision, I mean, you're gonna have to get a variance, and you're gonna have to show if you're gonna have to get a variance regardless, and you're gonna have to show if the interpretation is to move the setbacks over, how you're gonna fit a house there. And I don't know. We'll see if you state claim you could do it, but I think that's gonna be difficult with the square footage you propose.
Potentially get a variance for those also.
Or you're gonna have to get a variance for those, in which case I would suspend this application and have you go before the ZBA, and then we can always condition this approval on the ZBA, but because of these outstanding issues, I would suspend this application if you were allowed to move forward and then go, you're gonna have to get a variance and potentially redraw. So you would go out, get your variance, and come back before the planning board if you're allowed to move forward.
So the variance would be the setbacks?
Depending on the interpretation, but the variance is for the 35% is over the 25% minimum.
Okay. So if the setbacks kick in, I would need some definition as to where, because this crosses diagonally,
So you would go, the building inspector will provide how he measured it in his interpretation.
Okay,
And point being, if you get to that point where you're able to move forward and you're in front of the ZBA, and if they feel similar to this board about it, it may be worth pursuing some variances for setbacks to make it more uniform, more in conformance with the house
Okay.
next to you.
so to be clear, we need to wait for, do we go directly to the ZBA or do we wait for the interpretation?
You're gonna wait and come back next meeting where we discuss the interpretation and the legal interpretation. The board will vote next meeting potentially, if they feel ready, on whether or not, in the end, it's a board decision of whether or not this is allowed to move forward based on the law. It's gonna be a board consensus. It's gonna have to be up for a vote.
Okay.
Does everybody understand that?
Mark, you don't think that there's any potential to fill?
I mean, honestly, if I have to prove that it's affecting anything upstream, you know what this involves.
Yeah,
It's gonna get pretty expensive.
There is a SWIP for Burger King that's filed, like, you can use some of that
But a
evidence.
SWIP's not gonna tell you, you're looking for 100-year flows through that BFE. It's not, a SWIP's not that. What this would entail for a 2-lot split, I'd tell them, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
You mentioned before you would, what you had to do to change to get rid of the garage, because that has a driveway that's coming up, which is putting the house too close onto the flood.
Yeah,
Plain line.
we could put the garage under the house.
You could, that's why why don't you just move the house over, get rid of all that going back, and you're nowhere near the floodplain or whatever the setbacks are.
Oh, I'm with you, just.
Or just use the same driveway for both homes and they utilize that to go to a garage.
Yeah.
You just stay away from
it. I could do a garage under.
You know what I mean? You can go up and over and not have to deal with, I don't think anything.
But the thing is,
To me, the big thing is the variance for the 25% to 35%.
Right.
Me too, I
So-
agree.
But before that, I would need to know that the board's okay to allow us to subdivide. Because there's no sense in going after a variance if you guys come back and say, we don't want you to
Yeah,
subdivide this.
no,
I'm in a quandary.
I know, I'm like, what comes
What-
first?
Right.
Chicken or the
Yeah, I
egg?
mean, the other thing is you could make the lot more conforming on lot number 1 by moving your line, no?
Well, I got that existing driveway. I mean, until today, I just wanted to keep something that looked normal, so you had 2 driveways that are side by side and there is a shared driveway option. I personally wouldn't recommend it, but
No, nope.
yeah, I don't think it's a good idea.
This is
I
making
mean-
neighbors.
The residential homes in this area are almost what we're showing. Again, I didn't really toy with the house configuration. Obviously, we could. I think we can meet the 12-yard. I could certainly move it to the right. I could do a garage under. I could gain all that, area to the right. The side yards, would be, we could do it, but again, before we really decide to go and get a variance, I want to know how the board feels about, is this a subdividable lot?
I think the problem is you could say it's subdividable if we see what the proposal is, but I can't say it's subdividable if I can't see where everything's gonna be. Like that's.
Well, it's two separate.
Yeah, it's 2 separate questions. Whether or not it can be subdivided is like an interpretation of the code, so
Right.
that's definitely the first
You
thing.
could put a 10 by 10 house on there.
Sure, yeah. Is there anybody living in this house on lot
Yeah.
number 2?
Yeah, this is occupied, the existing lot too, yeah.
Okay, but you own it, obviously, to do the subdivision.
My son will be moving into the next door.
Okay.
Okay, so the
So
next
I just
meeting
want to
we
add one
will,
more thing. Because of the way that the code is written and kind of bounces all over and references 100-year floodplain in some sections and not in others. In this section, it talks about, it doesn't specifically say the 100-year floodplain. It talks about land that's prone to flooding. So
Interesting.
just trying to take the temperature of the board on how they feel about this whole discussion. It seems that they are somewhat sympathetic to the applicant, but I'm not going to go to brush any judgment
mean-
there. But if you were able to provide documentation that the property was not prone to flooding, and that documentation could be providing photo evidence of the property showing that it is not flooded during a documented flood event. I
Yeah.
mean, that is documentation. I mean, I don't know how you can dig that up.
Would an affidavit be appropriate for the homeowners?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, is that,
Oh.
I mean, we have people that, you know, have lived in those homes for years that,
All around us, everybody knows.
No,
would that be sufficient?
Is it a statement? Can we get a
I
statement?
mean,
I would
I
say-
talk to these people, I mean, I know
Schofield.
Schofield, my
Yeah.
neighbors, you know, close friends with them, but, and I know Glenn Senior, and I know that we get more flooding where we're at, as far as basement water, you know, I don't want to say flooding, that's.
Mm.
And Steve
Water.
said his mom's house was always dry, right there, so I personally don't think it's prone to flooding, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think like the question of whether or not that would be good enough, like, I mean, it depends on what the statements are and how far back they go and like to say yes now and have.
It's written in Old English, does that qualify?
It has to be in Dutch, actually, only in Dutch. But I think like I mean, just to be clear, the reason that we're making an issue of this is because like we're accountable to the people who will live there, right? And like their insurability and like.
I think an option for the board is you could, I was gonna talk about the public hearing before, we close today. You could
That's a good idea.
do a public hearing. I mean, the planner has recommended that we don't, you have to have a public hearing for all subdivisions legally.
Right.
It doesn't matter when you open it, it just matters when you close it. So you could open it at the February meeting, and if you could get a neighbor or two to come out and actually speak to the board, maybe that could be persuasive
Okay,
instead of a written statement, or if you could get a written statement read during the public hearing, I think that's a great opportunity. Then the board can vote with all the background that they have, and they could vote next meeting. So
okay.
anything persuasive that you could bring, if they have photos of what, saying their basement has never flooded, bringing a map of where they are, things like that would be helpful, I think.
Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, because like what Christian said at the beginning, it's vague and we want to get rid of the vagueness.
I get
of
it.
And there's, I mean, been plenty of flooding events in the village.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there's photos of
Wait.
every corner of the village, depending on who
Tell
you
you the
talk
date.
to. I know, I'm out there taking a ton of photos. I'm gonna.
Well, Montfort,
I'm gonna go through and take a look. I may have some.
I mean, I don't have a photo of it, but when Montfort flooded, I don't know, the last time, when we had that weird storm,
Yeah.
and, I was happened to be up there, and there was no one there. It was all down.
I was walking around trying to document everything, and I may have photos from up there, so I'll try to take a look.
All right, well, I mean, the best we may be able to do for February would be to bring neighbors or, some owners.
Everybody.
I
So,
mean, and Keith Schofield, who's an engineer or an architect and, who's worked with you before,
he
he
no
can-
longer lives here.
well, I know, but he could, he can write a letter or whatever of his professional and growing up there. You know,
He did,
it's a personal and professional thing that he could bring into the equation. I think
Okay.
it'd definitely help you.
I'll do that.
Just a suggestion.
He just had his gallbladder out, so,
Yeah, yes.
he's stuck in bed.
That's it, give him a laptop.
I don't.
You want to make a motion for a public hearing for next?
I could, just,
I know I took pictures of when it.
do you think
flooded down.
that, having the public hearing
Oh, yes.
would be, I mean, we're going to the public and saying, we're thinking about subdividing it, but we haven't decided to let it be subdivided.
Isn't that all public hearings? I mean, every public hearing is, hey, I want to develop this property, come out and talk about it. That's actually, that's the purpose of public hearings, is actually to discuss whether or not the neighbors want the project. So I personally don't think it's premature. And honestly, if you get enough people to come out, you could maybe close it without, I mean, depending on what we hear and where the board's at, you can maybe close the public hearing and refer them to the ZBA that night and push the project forward, because no matter what, this is gonna have to go before the ZBA. So that'd probably be my recommendation.
Board?
I think that sounds great,
Yeah.
like giving people an opportunity to speak. Is there any way to accept written comments before the hearing next month? Like, do we have a mechanism to do that, or is it just open it in February and people come then?
I think that we'll, review the comments, from our
You can
attorney and
notice,
planner.
you
and
can
then-
notice the public hearing as well.
And then open the public hearing. So we'll have your comments, then open the public hearing, and then if necessary, all my public hearings stay open until
Yes.
the decision is made.
So can people, sorry, I think I didn't totally understand. So can people submit written comments as well before the February meeting?
You can notice when you notice the public hearing that,
Okay.
it's better to have a policy where you're not all over, and I apologize since I'm filling in for Victoria. I don't know off the top of my head how you typically notice your hearings. But yes, when you do the notice of the public hearing, you could say, please, you advisable to submit written comments at the clerk's email or the secretary's email, and then, up to the day before, and, we will accept written comments through the hearing date, and just, it has to be noticed that way. But as long as it's noticed that way, you can accept written comments.
Great. I guess I would also like to accept written comments if that's okay. So it's not as much of a barrier for people who aren't able to make it in person.
We did that the last public hearing for the.
The thing is that, how are people gonna comment on something they don't know anything about?
Well, are we able to put some of this information on the website publicly?
I mean, and you can walk around to your neighbors and tell them to look at the website.
Yeah, I mean, this should, all public hearings, that's a question for all public hearings. Everything should, open meeting law says everything should be online. So when the public comes, they should be able to request it. And when, I mean, my first view of the website, it was this is a very nice village website. Everything was easily to quick to go through. So I think that shouldn't be a barrier.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion that we open a public hearing on February 20th at 6 p.m.
I
Shortly
motion
after.
that we open a public hearing on February 20th at 6 p.m. and also provide a mechanism by which people can submit written comments before then.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Okay. So you'll, get your comments to us. And then, once the comments are there, you can get them up to the board members for review. Does anybody else have any comments, questions? Nobody?
No, I've been pretty quiet in the village lately.
Yeah. Anything from the board of trustees? Nothing? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn then.
No move.
Second.
Have a motion second to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
February.